Hello, guys. Welcome to a brand new episode of The Film Angle. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
And the big one we've been teasing for a really long time is here. We're talking about Barbenheimer, which everybody in the world has already kind of had their say and pitch on. It's strange that we are like pitting these two films together that are so diametrically opposed, but we can't ignore that the whole phenomenon of their release and probably one of the biggest weekends in cinema history in terms of box office has occurred, and these two movies are at the center of it. And I'm there for it. I think the whole thing is just absolutely amazing. It's just so great to even go into your workplace and discuss with people who wouldn't necessarily would normally be talking about visiting the cinema, are all visiting the cinema to see
It's
both of these movies.
it's a cultural phenomenon at the moment. Like, it is
It is.
brilliant
It's
to see.
temporary though, but
It
it's
is
it's exciting.
temporary. When we've had a slightly lackluster start to summer cinema, with lots of flops and all that kind of stuff, to see these two films, one of them, like both expected to do well in their own rights at any point, but almost kind of hyping each other up to this kind of event that has been the Barbenheimer weekend. And it was really fun to kind of see two completely different films over the course of like 2 days, and both I think good in their own right, and but also both very different. They don't warrant comparison in any kind of way at all, apart from the fact that they've both opened up on this weekend. But at the same time, I think drawing comparison from the two of them is actually really interesting. This kind of Barbenheimer meme thing that has taken off has meant for some really interesting discussions. But yeah, you're right. It's probably Barbie more than anything has been the one that lots of people are discussing right now. They're saying that I guess my workplace is predominantly women, and that is what the film is kind of targeting. So maybe that's from my point of view. I don't know. I think your workplace is maybe predominantly male, Chris. Is it more Oppenheimer in the in the business in the construction world?
I would say, surprisingly enough, actually, more of the conversation has been led by Barbie, and I
Yeah.
do think it's because of the initial response to, somebody maybe not necessarily knowing what who Greta Gerwig is and who Noah Baumbach is, and what kind of project they'd be behind. They might have taken the title of Barbie at face value, and maybe. And it's come to light that it's not exactly that, and they're now more aware of it, and that's become a bit more of a conversation in itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Barbie is predominantly the conversation and I'm for
Yeah.
it to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. Because it is this man hating phenomenon, and is very anti
Oh
men and
yeah,
wants to kill all men.
yeah. I mean, Ben Shapiro said it, so you know, so
Have
we
you
should all
watched
take
his
heed.
40-minute
I,
takedown of
I I have not
Barbie?
had the pleasure of
I know.
inducting myself into
I
one of
kind
the.
of
I know what video
yeah.
that's going to be. I know it's going to be.
Yeah, I kind of want to watch it, but at the same time, I don't want to give him the views. But yeah, just his response was predictable, as
Yeah,
expected,
probably one of his
obviously.
longest videos he's ever recorded as well.
Yes, yeah. Clearly, and having watched the film, clearly he must not have kind of got it in a way. Like, I
Yeah,
realize
he wasn't
that's
he wasn't
unfair to
enough.
say
Yeah,
someone didn't get the film, but like, I don't think you fully got the film, mate. But there you go. There you go.
Uh, people are saying that he's kind of like been cosplaying unintentionally as Ken in the movie, where you went to
And yeah,
see the film dressed as like Ken is during the big dance number in the last act of the film. So
secretly deep
yeah,
down, he's like, I'm a massive
secretly
fan,
loving
but
it.
I can't let my fan base know. Like, my fan base expect a certain amount of something
Yeah.
from me, and I have to take it down because it's pink. Oh, I was just gonna say, we promised the listeners last time that we'd wear the T-shirt that we a color T-shirt. I've messed that up. We'd be wearing the color T-shirt
Hmm.
that would represent our kind of leanings in the Barbenheimer debate. Chris, I know this is this is not official medium, but Chris has gone for a very
Tie dye.
um, tie dye, so it definitely has elements of pink. But I almost can see like some form of explosion in it as well. Where
Yeah,
is that leaning
you're
towards where
doing me
you're
a
thinking?
really big service there. Actually, I was channeling specifically Beach Can. Yeah, that's what I'm going for right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice,
I'm
nice.
going for it.
Serenading on the guitar, beach can.
Yes, yes. Oh, like that's such a good part of the movie. Yeah, no, I completely forgot the memo
Ah,
that I personally inflicted, but I'm gonna go with what you just said. I think before we go into the movies, I think the one that's probably resonating with me weeks after, and I wasn't expecting it to, is probably Barbie. Marginally so over Oppenheimer. Really, there's not much between these two in terms of quality and what they set out to do, both the filmmakers. But the movies are so different. I mean, I can't really compare it all, but we're going to have to look at these things through a microscope individually. Um, but I'm going with Barbie.
okay, interesting, interesting. I am not wearing a fully black t-shirt, but I am wearing a darker t-shirt. I think
And a trilby.
um, it's difficult. I think, yeah, on initial reaction, I think Oppenheimer is the better film. But like they're both so good.
Hmm.
If you look on my letterbox, I rate them exactly the same. But if I was pitching one against the other, I think like Oppenheimer maybe just comes out on top, but only by a little bit, I think. But they're like we've said, they're very different entities, and
Hmm.
very very different films, striving to do mostly different things. I think you could say, but both kind of wrapping their heads around history and kind of not being one-sided either way. Would you say maybe like they both kind of grapple with the problematic history of both their characters?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it.
A comparison they never knew would happen.
Yeah, you managed to find it. Yeah, I mean, I completely get that. I think Barbie is sort of reckoning with the history and the problematic nature of creating like a whole sort of uh, little girl subculture around this idealized version of what a woman should be, and how that's kind of rippled throughout the years and how that's kind of evolved and how Mattel has kind of had a little hand to play in there too. It's the best marketing strategy ever in a film. In a way, Mattel have kind of been like everybody's been saying, "Oh my god, Mattel have been absolutely how did they get away with doing this?" But at the same time, it's a pretty clever structure too. I mean, you don't go come out of the movie thinking like, oh, burn the studios and burn the corporations down. The movie has a very like Muppets feel to it with that sort of element of the story,
Yeah.
in terms of the corporate stuff. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, when you see Greta Gerwig's letterbox watch list, I can see all of those movies that she was influenced by or like are directly referenced in here. We got like Singing in the Rain. The big dance number that comes towards the end of the movie is completely mirroring the ballet sequence from that film. But we got elements of the Truman Show in here. There's lots of stuff to unravel, and it's great. I think it grasps so many different themes and ideas in its mind, and maybe it's not completely perfect in its presentation, but you're so wrapped up in the fun of it all, and there's such great heart in here that some of that stuff doesn't even matter. And I say that there is great artistry here. It's Greta Gerwig, for goodness
Oh
sake.
yeah.
The production design in this film, as soon as you are introduced to Barbie Land, it is mind bending. The size of this giant production set and just how well the details are conjured up here, and her just how she doubles down and everything. It's great. It's fully realized, and I'm so glad it exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and I think you say like it is this brilliant marketing strategy. It 100% is, and obviously Mattel have allowed for the kind of freedom. By the way, I guess we're talking about Barbie first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've kind of forced your hand there.
I think that's fine though. I'm ready to talk. I think Mattel have allowed for this kind of look back at the history of Barbie and kind of the highs and the lows and how it's kind of shaped different generations in different ways. but also kind of the problems that have arisen from that. This kind of idealized woman with kind of, I think it's one of the famous things of like, if the proportions of Barbie were correct on a real woman, she wouldn't actually be able to stand up or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
it's some kind of crazy thing. So like, Greta Gerwig has been able to kind of wrap her own head around that, almost like shape this kind of thesis of like what Barbie was, what it's evolved into, and what it could become. But obviously, Barbie is the feminist movie of the moment. So like, you come out of it with this idea of like, yeah, Barbie now is feminism. So yeah, like it's I think it's fully worked in Mattel's favor, despite them poking fun at themselves a bit. Yeah, maybe a bit of a risk to
Mm.
do so, but good to see. But also, from all the news post Barbie with it doing so well, and now Mattel want to make multiple sequels and spin offs with different
Ah,
toys,
man, no.
does also make you realize maybe you didn't really truly watch your own film and kind of
Mhm.
learn the lessons of why
I,
it's
I
good and
I
and
do
and
hope that does not occur, because that would only dilute the potency that's in this movie, and the message it brings home. But
Have you seen the memes of Greta Gerwig as Oppenheimer realizing that she has started a ripple effect across the film industry?
yeah, she'll be having presidential conferences soon enough.
Yeah. She'll be like, "What have I done? What have I created?" But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, no, it is really good to kind of see. But it is also kind of this big celebration of having, you know, just pure femininity on screen in
Exactly.
all its expensive glory. It's pink and it's big and it's loud, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, it is what I think we wanted it to be from Greta Gerwig, and I'm glad like an artist has been able to come in and do that.
I think that although that this is, a positive feminist movie, it's not feminist in the sense that a lot of people are painting it with at the minute, where, particularly a certain demographic, where they're stating that it's anti-men. Now, this movie did not feel like that at all to me. By the end of this movie, there really does feel like this movie is pro everybody and equality towards everybody, and this sort of like utopia, one-sided each way, is not really the way, to go. We can't we need to sort of recognize our past and our history, and just kind of learn to kind of bolster each other up, is kind of where I got from this movie. And not really like, but also recognizing that there are things that women have to deal with that, us men probably are privy to, but kind of turn a blind eye to quite a lot. I think the America Ferrera speech that comes kind of two-thirds into the movie, which a lot of people have kind of highlighted is kind of the crux of the film, is a really kind of oh shit moment. I mean, like, it is kind of a realization and a wake up call, and something that we've heard a million times in other movies before. It's not certainly a new revelation,
Mm,
perhaps maybe for a general audience member, they might have heard this for the first time, and it might be a really big revelatory thing, but it still does carry through the message of the film really, really well. And also recognizes that, yes, although that we are celebrating independence and getting away from the patriarchy that kind of grasps us down and forces us to kind of worship this idealized version of an artificial doll, we still also recognize that matriarchy and the sort of the comfort of relationships between mothers and daughters is kind of at the core of this film too. And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it manages to like kind of ride the line between being on everybody's side, but also get its message through really, really well. So
Yes.
it's not a preachy film at all.
No,
I,
I
I
mean it's about having an identity at the end of the day, isn't
And
it?
it's also
It's
having a sense of humor about your own, your own sex's history, and the problems that comes with that. It's kind of have a laugh at yourself, but also, I
yeah.
just don't understand why people just cannot get over their own sort of limitations and scope of
Well, I
how they under.
mean, the way women have been portrayed on film is kind of been flipped around in Barbie. Like
Yes,
Ken
of
is
course, yeah.
the dumb blonde who is just the partner of Barbie and doesn't really have at least at the beginning of the film much kind of like identity and kind of control over his own
No,
existence. He just does beach and loves Barbie. That is what he does. So like to see the to see it on the other foot, I guess, is maybe kind of alarming to some people. But yeah, this is women have been portrayed in many different ways. Like how many kind of like detective films have we seen where like, there's just a woman at home on the phone, just the guy to talk to on the other, or the woman to talk to, and be like, oh, things are bad at the moment. She's like, oh, just come home soon. Like women have been just like someone to come home to in a lot of films for a lot of
Yeah,
times, but then
yeah.
they've also played the dumb blondes, many a time before. So we get to see it from Ken this time. Which I think is great, but then also kind of grapple with that. Yeah, like you said, it is a film that kind of, for the most part, strives for equality, but isn't afraid to still kind of joke and kind of punch down towards men a little bit, which is absolutely fine. I think there's a joke at the end where Ken, when they're putting the government back together, and the Kens want a part in the government, and they're like, maybe you can start off a little bit, so I can maybe see some very angry dudes getting angry at that part. But I think it is just that idea of like, we will get there. We will get to equality. It will happen. But yeah, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't play the part of like Barbie Land is the epitome of like the perfect universe, because they are all just Barbies and they are all just Kens and they need identity.
So I think the biggest takeaway from this film is obviously this is like two big major stars leading this project. We got Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, and I still think that Margot Robbie really does really anchor this film really well, and she is the perfect embodiment of Barbie, and there's nobody else who's better to portray her. But
Agreed.
the elephant in the room is that Gosling does steal the show.
Yes, he is given obviously more of the kind of outlandish
Oh
comedic
yeah,
reliance
yeah.
to
He is
do.
given the
So
scenarios on a silver platter, but it's what he does with those, the micro expressions, the sort of physicality, and just the embodiment of Ken, and everything that he does in the role is just. It's impossible not to laugh at every single joke. I mean, I don't think anything that he said fell flat for me. Every time I saw Ken on screen, or certainly Ryan Gosling's portrayal of Ken, I was just like, I was putty in the hands of that. I'm a complete sucker for that sort of humor, and also what that humor represented as well. Um,
I
it,
can't think of anybody who like would have given their all as much as it felt like Ryan Gosling gave his all
I
as
think
Ken.
Gosling just gives his all and everything, though. Like, whenever I see him, certainly in the last sort of 10 years, the guy just throws himself into any sort of role.
I
He's
love
so
seeing it in
diverse.
comedy roles as well. Like, yeah, I feel like he hasn't done loads, but when he does, they're so good and he's so funny. But yeah, I mean, he eats up the screen in this whenever he's on there, and obviously that helps in that kind of of Ken becoming a character in his own right. It helps that Ryan Gosling is such a character in this role, and it is brilliant just to see him chilling in his Mojo Dojo Casa house,
Oh, yeah.
drinking the brewskis with the bros.
his whole self discovery phase of the film, when they arrive to the real world, and he goes on his own little adventure and goes to the library and picks up books on horses and patriarchy. It's just
Yeah.
that whole sequence is so funny. I think the moment where they land on the beach, and they have a discussion. The whole feminist thing comes into play really, really well, when Barbie is kind of dismayed by like all the glares that she gets on the beach, and Ken consequently admits he gets a few glares too, and their sort of reaction is to, I know who will be the most comforting people in this situation, a group of construction workers.
Yes.
and and then there becomes an exchange about like how they don't have genitalia, and yeah, it's like, I don't have any, you don't have any genitals, and then Ryan Gosling says, I have all the genitals.
I just love that whole like, because I was surprised by how much they weren't in the real world for long, but I did love that segment probably the most. I loved Ken coming to realize, within 10 minutes of being in the real world, that like actually men run the show here, and for him he was like, wow, this is great, like
Yeah.
so much more going on, and well, for him anyway.
Yeah,
And I
like,
just, that whole sequence of him coming to that realization and then deciding to take that back to Barbie Land honestly one of my kind of favorite moments from the film.
Oh
I just
yeah,
think it's so brilliantly stupid that it's great.
I didn't think I'd see like a parallel of the SpongeBob movie in this when like Barbie returns to
Yes.
Barbie Land and it's like when SpongeBob returns to Bikini Bottom and it's Planktopolis or something. This is like Ken's version of that. It's yeah. She should have put that on her Barbie watch list as well. I think.
Uh,
No, but I mean, it is so it is just incredible. I mean, the choreography. I was just for me as a big musical fan, as you're aware, that whole sequence with the "I'm just Ken" was just like enough to send me over the edge. Especially when it divulged into the full blown Hollywood musical number. I was just like, I am actually sitting in this cinema right now watching this is absolutely crazy. But no, I mean the whole so many moments to pick apart here. If I had a criticism in this film at all, I really, although I think that there is a lot of scope and flexibility with the plot of America Ferrera and her daughter that Barbie
yeah,
interacts with, I do feel like that sort of plot line gets dropped. I was expecting a lot more like sort of emotional catharsis between America Ferrera and Margot Robbie's Barbie. I thought there
yeah,
was going to be a little bit more of a childhood connection and kind of a relationship between doll and owner was going to come into play a little bit
yeah.
more there, and how that
Or even
related.
just
No,
sorry,
no. Go ahead.
or even just more kind of that kind of the daughter and the mum like coming together and
Yeah,
kind of recognizing each other and understanding each other more. I mean, it is there, but it's just it does feel like the
they're
film
passengers here,
wants
aren't
to
they?
push the message more than it does the kind of emotional relationships. I do think that means the emotional relationships are kind of, you know, what you'd expect, but they don't really delve deep into it too
Hmm.
much, which is it's fine. The movie still works, but yeah, you're right. If I wanted anything, it would be kind of more human relationships, I guess, and
Yeah,
how they kind of been affected by this whole thing.
give that plot line a little bit more time to cook,
Yeah,
and perhaps like that montage sequence, which a lot of people find sort of really moving. I kind of gauged that from our Full House cinema on
yeah,
Friday night. That a lot of people find the montage sequence between the mothers and daughters and the archival footage quite powerful and moving. For me, I found it on a surface level, but also it didn't kind of linger because I felt like nothing was building up to that moment. It kind of came out of nowhere.
yeah. But then
Um,
again, I guess like we are maybe not the audience for that moment. Like I have, I remember
mhm,
Barbies being around. I never owned any. That's just
sure,
how it was. And then like my second, like I played with them in kind of what do you call it, like reception and stuff like that. Occasionally. But yeah, like my next big kind of interaction with Barbie was probably when you and I were both working at Toys R Us and we were having to kind of fill out those
yeah,
spaces with Barbie toys, and we probably got to know a lot more about Barbie toys through that and all the different kind of ways. It was
yeah.
definitely that
Certainly
kind
that.
of wave of them trying to diversify Barbie during that time as well. I remember
Yeah,
that much. But yeah, that was probably my biggest interaction with Barbie. So I don't have the kind of nostalgia for playing with them or anything like that. But yeah, maybe that's. But yeah, you're right. I think the Full House cinema I also had it. Yeah, I think it did hit emotionally for some, but maybe you and I just weren't the intended audience.
I thought the most hilarious. Forget the film. The most hilarious part of my experience in that cinema was towards the end of the film. I heard, I don't know, like a teenage kind of audience member. She kind of just said, I heard her say to her friend, "What is patriarchy?" If you haven't got it by now, you'll never will.
I think that's the thing. There's going to be, if you're taking your young kids to this, expect a lot of
Yeah.
questions about certain things. What's a gynecologist and what's the patriarchy and all kinds of
Can I get
things.
a clicky pen? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you, I think those are, not bad questions. I think happy to, I'm sure most parents would be happy to kind of talk about those things or allow the Barbie to be an introduction to those things. Who knows? Maybe not everybody will be happy about that, but I don't know. I think it's
I was glad.
interesting.
I was glad to see. mermaid Barbie in here simply due to the fact that whenever we were working in Toys R Us, that's probably the Barbie we were putting out the most. There was a lot of mermaid Barbies
There
at that
was a lot
time.
of mermaid Barbies.
That
Yeah, there
2016
was.
period was like the age of mermaid. And yeah, some great cameos in here too. I mean, we even have John Cena.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So very random ones. I'd be really sad if I was like, the member of sex education that didn't get the call
Uh,
to be in the Barbie film. Like they're all
sure.
in there.
Yeah, of course. And you even have like really unexpected cameos like Rob Brydon and everything in here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was
That-
interesting,
I think
but
anybody who
not
kind of raised their hand.
not too much that it felt just like a
No, no, not at all. Not at
celebrity-a-thon,
all.
which I feel like if they made a sequel, it will definitely become. Especially if they make a sequel without Greta Gerwig, it will become a cameo fest. I just know it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much control like Greta has over that sort of process now. I suppose it's kind of like out of her hands now, right? And
Yeah.
Mattel, and Warner Brothers can sort of do whatever they want to do with that, which is sort of a shame because I'm with you. I sort of think that they will take this thing, see it for the dollar value, and just kind of run it into the ground like everybody is doing at the minute. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I could do like a Disney Plus esque like mini 20-minute 10-minute show where Ken has like little sort of interactions with people, or he's like, I don't know, this he's gonna fucking be a doctor today, or he's gonna be a I could see that sort of format happening. But I feel another feature, I think leave it as it is. I think it got in and out exactly at the right time, and it's yeah. I don't know. I don't see what else you could do with this material.
Yeah. What message do you have next to kind of tell? Because I think that would be, and again, I think I've been mentioning this a lot in recent episodes of like, you really got to figure out what you want to say before you just make a film instead of just being like, hey, we're making Barbie 2, which they will. There's no doubt they will make Barbie 2. Whether they should or shouldn't is another thing, but let's just hope they know the story they want to tell, and it's not just because this is on its way to make $1 billion.
Yeah, and I don't think a filmmaker like Greta Gerwig will ever half-heartedly put effort in anything. There seems to be a lot of thought put behind all three of her major directorial projects so far, and I think the common thread between all three is definitely mother and daughter relationships, and it'll be interesting to see if she carries on that sort of thing. That seems to be what's at the kind of the forefront of her mind. Um,
Yeah.
Another performance. Can I just say, like, we always say we like to appreciate the good old glory days of Adam McKay, like 2007 to 2010 Will Ferrell period. I think we got a little bit back of the old Will Ferrell in this performance. I thought he was uh, absolutely delight in this thing.
Yes, yeah, like straddling that line of somewhere between Elf and Anchorman, like it
Yeah,
was it was good.
yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was the perfect kind of cast for that role of
Uh,
like the dumb but still lovable CEO of Mattel. Like, okay, sure.
Yeah, 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 and really, I could see another similarity here. I'm just thinking about all the film sort of that she's kind of honing in on here. Like the Wizard of Oz comes to mind as well. Like I kind of see Will Ferrell CEO as the wizard in this story, where sort of like the veil behind the behind the curtain, this sort of like mystery and sort of wherever I came from, and it's just really this guy. He doesn't really know much about anything about apart from making money, and there definitely is more like a visual understanding of that in the last part of the film, where he literally does come like from behind a curtain. And yeah, so it's great. Greta likes all the movies I like. That's all I see to say.
Yeah, it definitely felt that way for yourself, who's a big musical fan, and then seeing the list of her kind of inspirations. I was like, okay, yeah, Chris is gonna
Yeah,
love this
and
film.
a movie that we really loved, a movie we really loved in our BFI top 100 is A Matter of Life and Death, that she was really inspired by too. I can see a
Yeah,
lot of that in terms of like how she represents the bridging between the worlds, and the sort of the
yeah.
big, massive industrial but sort of magical set design. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and the
there's a
set
lot to
design
like
was
her.
great because I think there's this. It feels like obviously there's a lot of special effects going on, but there was also some kind of like it felt like really interesting set design and stylistic. Yeah, I think it was a really good way of showing like a toy world. I just thought, yeah,
Yeah,
just
and how
everything
it's
worked really
responsive too,
nicely.
and it exists without the characters in it.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it was good. It was good.
Yeah. So I'm definitely recommending Barbie for anybody who hasn't seen it
Yes.
yet. I mean, who
Yes.
hasn't seen this yet? I mean, it's evident in the box office. I mean, are we gonna go see it make its way to $1 billion? I know it's kind of
Yes.
at like 600 million mark at the minute. Um,
100% we are.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
making a billion. It's the
yeah.
biggest film of the year. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Man, it's great. It's great time to be alive to really kind of like witness that a movie like this can be so monumental and but actually be good at the same time. You know, I
Yeah.
didn't have I had my reservations in terms of what the corporate input to film like this would be, but I should always have faith in a filmmaker like Greta Gerwig. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
great.
it makes you forget about some of the kind of cynicism of it being a big toy marketing advert when it actually has like a human voice behind it. Because I think at the end of the day, like we said at the start, like it works in Mattel's favor in a
Mhm.
massive way. And, that might be really cynical, but, at the end of the day, it is there to make more money. Barbie dolls in particular and Barbie as a brand has not been making money over the last few years. They are dipping in sales. They are not as popular as they once used to be, and this is going to completely revamp them and change the way they look at on to the modern woman and the modern woman's children. Like
At least temporarily, anyway. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it is still also a big toy advert and will kind of do huge things for the Barbie brand. But at the same time, it is nice that a human person is making the film and has a message they want to tell, and they were able to tell it, and it doesn't feel like too icky, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, I completely agree with that. Time to switch gears.
Yeah, let's from kind of the patriarchy to existential dread of how we're all going to die one day. Let's
Yeah.
jump into Oppenheimer.
Yeah. So again, a really long anticipated movie. I think Nolan is like one of those filmmakers who's probably one of the only filmmakers around today, apart from say like the likes of James Cameron or Spielberg. Although I don't think Spielberg even has that power anymore. Who really has can hone an audience and kind of do whatever he wants to do, and that same audience and their multitudes will come to every single project. And this is another example. I mean, can you think of another filmmaker who would perhaps attach themselves to a project like this and really have the same amount of people coming to see it? I don't think so. I think there are movies made about historical figures who have such an impact in our history, like Oppenheimer, that are made every single year, but get dwindling amounts of people to get their bums on seats.
Yeah, like
And
this film has already made more than Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and it's a 3-hour film of guys talking in
yeah,
meetings
yeah,
and
yeah.
coming up with the nuclear bomb. So like,
Mission Impossible is a little bit different though. I mean, Mission Impossible has never been like a big opener sort of movie. It's always had legs and kind of just keeps kind of they keeping on and getting little bits here and there and then eventually makes quite a lot of money. But yeah, I think it's been long enough that a movie's been out now that we can say that it's not as big of a performer as this. And I like to say I'm gonna say I like Oppenheimer a lot, kind of equal to Barbie, but I think Mission Impossible is still my favorite summer blockbuster movie. I that's more me. I kind of just that's what I want from this dreadful year that we've had in the cinema so far is just some good popcorn
I
entertainment, and we
mean,
got
yeah,
that from that
if
movie.
in
But
terms of popcorn entertainment, it's definitely the one. Well, maybe Barbie, but yeah, I mean, yeah. Oppenheimer doesn't feel like a blockbuster, but like you said, when you have somebody like Christopher Nolan attached, people come in to
oh
watch it,
yeah,
and it is mad that it's making the amount of money that it is. With like we mentioned, it being like this 3-hour slow moving film,
yeah,
um, about this kind of historical, potentially one of the biggest, kind of most pivotal historical moments in human history.
hmm
Because we're all going to die from nuclear war one day. So this is the starting point.
yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting to kind of have your hand held and taken on this journey through the sort of through the man himself and his sort of demons and how he sort of dealt with this overbearing intellectual quality that he kind of had to wrestle with his whole life. You know, that kind of that comes at a cost, and that definitely is at the forefront of this movie's mind in terms of like his personal romantic relationships, his relationships with his colleagues, and just his own morality. You know, it kind of reminded me a lot of Miyazaki's film that came out in 2013, The Wind Rises, where that kind of dealt with a similar issue, where it was about a Japanese airplane designer who created the kamikaze airplane, and his brilliance was like kind of untethered, and he just really wanted to design planes because he loved planes, but had to wrestle with the outcome that his planes were used for a deed that he didn't really see coming. And maybe that's to a lesser degree here. I think Oppenheimer knew,
Yes.
obviously knew where this was going to be used, but the brilliance and the realization of what is used for and how the handover to the American government, they just snatch it from him in the end, and what they ultimately end up doing with it, really hits home from him, and that's kind of the big part of the movie that it's sort of wrestling with for the rest of it. But I'm skipping like a lot of stuff before that.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
also a film that doesn't want you. It wants you to make your own mind up as
mm,
to whether you feel sorry for him or not, because I don't think it necessarily makes a very strong case for him being so against using it, because he's quite like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't. Like, I don't know, ask the other guys as well. Like, deep down, there's an element of him that's like, I want to see if this works, and
yeah,
I think he wrestles more with it post the real bomb being dropped rather than the test bomb. Probably hits him harder than he was expecting it to.
yeah, and I think that the movie wrestles with a lot of paranoias of the time too. There's a
Yes.
whole argument of if we don't do it, who else will? And
Yeah.
it kind of wrestles with that a lot too. And it's I can see that dilemma for somebody who would have that power and that intellect behind them. They have lives on both sides of the table on their hands,
Yeah.
and perhaps that they kind of thought that this technology might have been used as more of a posturing, like a political posturing tool,
Yeah.
to kind of make other sides, sort of surrender, or kind of uh, not invade, or participate in war activities as much. But the opposite ended up happening, and we just kind of Truman just kind of was gun ho and pulled the trigger on the whole thing. But
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like with the information presented to people or presented to Oppenheimer, it is very much a thing of like, well, yeah, I can understand why the world needed to create a nuclear bomb, because it felt like at the time it was like the Nazis are making one, and if the Nazis make one, then we need one, or we need to beat them in making one. Like, it's they nuke us or we nuke them. Obviously, later down the line, it's kind of a case of like, well, they've already given up, and then you're like, oh shit, I've made a nuclear bomb,
yeah,
and we didn't really need to. Um, but with the information presented at the time, you can kind of be like, yeah, I kind of get it, as much as it's awful,
yeah.
and the state of the world that we're in now, of this kind of you know nuclear paranoia and
Yeah, yeah, we're back in it
crazy
again.
people in
Yeah,
the heads of states, and threatening to use it, and potentially could one day, and that's just gonna, and it's not like the bomb they dropped, or the bombs they dropped in Japan. It's very much the hydrogen bomb, which they also touch upon within the film. It's gonna be, it could be the end of humanity, which is a kind of scary
yeah,
thought,
yeah, and
which the film definitely grapples with.
yeah, exactly. And even though the film is set during the Second World War, it is no less like relevant towards today. And we've got a lot more history post Second World War of the Cold War to kind of contend with, and really contextualizes the movie even more and
Yeah,
makes it even more potent than it would have been perhaps if you've seen this exact film 60 or 70 years ago.
yeah,
It's really interesting. I really like the way that Nolan has a real insistence, and I think Killian Murphy as a performer too, to not overly sensationalize his emotions as a character. They're really true to the individual and the sort of clinical. Well, I'd say this guy has emotions, but he is not overly flamboyant with them.
no,
He doesn't externalize quite a lot, and I think that's kind of ambiguity of that character and that performance really only helps the movie even more. I think of the moment when the big moment of the movie where he kind of is going through the crowd after the Trinity test, and everybody's applauding and the feet are stamping, and it's this whole celebratory moment. and he is just sort of filled with dread. And there's a sort of dramatic sort of dreamy sequence of a woman's face kind of peeling off, being burnt by an atom bomb. And he's sort of like, it's a representation of what's happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But I'm really glad that Nolan, as a restrained filmmaker, does not go overboard and like overly dramatize this moment. We're not seeing like thousands of bodies turned to ash or anything like that we would have perhaps
Yes.
got from another filmmaker. And he lets your imagination kind of go in over time and do the work for it.
Yeah, and because he's very much like, the film is obviously set in two different points of view, but for the most part, it's very much in Oppenheimer's point of view. He doesn't kind of, cut away to Japan and we see, some kind of
Yeah,
spectacle made of the bombs or anything like that. And, I know some people have criticized it for the lack of kind of any kind of Japanese point of view at all in it. But I think because we are very much from Oppenheimer's POV, and I think this is a film about him less so than the bomb. Like, it is difficult to say, just being like another white dude, but like, it feels like hearing it over the radio and interpreting it through him
yeah,
is kind of more interesting than cutting away from the whole, um, kind of the way the film looks and feels, cutting away to a
it
different
would have
country
felt
and away
completely
from those
cheap.
characters, just to kind of, I think it would feel more like spectacle. And yes, all right, we don't see any Japanese characters at all. Maybe that's strange, but this is a film that's grappling with something else. I think. I don't know. It's difficult to be the
Yeah,
voice of like, this is the right way to do it, but in my mind,
I think you're talking from a narrative perspective, and it would have
yeah, in my
felt.
mind, the narrative of the film lent itself in that way. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and it is as much as it's about the event, it's a movie about him,
Yeah,
as well. That
because
we're
the even the test bomb is like, it's not, and we were bigged up with the spectacle of this film, but it's not a long sequence. You get to see some kind of like nice imagery, I guess, or like scary imagery, depending on how you want to look at it.
yeah,
But like, even that is very much like a very very small section of the film. Um, it's not like this overlong. Like, the use of IMAX cameras here are used in a very different way, and I feel like this is probably maybe one of the first Nolan films where it's like, you don't have to see it in IMAX. I'm sure it looked great. You saw it in IMAX, I think, didn't
yeah,
you, Chris?
yeah. I did.
But I think, like, for the most part, it is a film of like guys just talking in boardroom. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the spectacle is not there, and so it shouldn't be, because it isn't a spectacular thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think the strength of the IMAX formatting is in that moment of the Trinity test and the sort of the sound design behind that. And I think the sort of the ambient sound that you get from an IMAX screen, or a Dolby screen or whatever, really lends to that moment, or that impact. And you really do get that sense of dread that, Jesus, we as a mankind are capable of constructing something so catastrophic. And so, and seeing the horrifying part of it is seeing the awe within the eyes of the men who have constructed this,
Hmm.
and not really what's going to come towards later. And that's kind of like, that's war in general, right? I mean, we get
Yeah.
people get so wrapped up in it that they don't really see the eternal regret that is going to come from years to come. I thought it was fascinating. I thought that the use of talking about um the Germans, the Nazis, and the Soviets as a background drop was actually a really really useful tool in kind of instilling dread
Yeah.
into the atmosphere of this movie. I think if we were cutting countries and cutting towards different perspectives, it would just feel it would feel like an old fashioned political thriller, which is
Yeah.
not what this is.
How much
Yeah,
did you know going in, like, around the history? Like, I knew of Oppenheimer. I knew of, creating the nuclear bomb, but that was about it. Like, I was very surprised by
I'm the same as
how
you.
much kind of like communist paranoia this film was more about, like the fear of communism, maybe more so than anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
And
we
like,
kind of.
that took me back. Like, and I guess that's because I didn't know about Oppenheimer's like political leanings. and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even think I knew of his kind of Jewish heritage until,
Mm.
the lead up to the film, and that's a really interesting angle as well, obviously. So like, yeah, I mean, it did mean that a lot of it was quite difficult to follow at times. Like, not in the way that I was
Okay.
completely out of the loop, but it was kind of it's one of those films where you're like, I think I know what they're talking about. I don't
Mm.
fully know what they're talking about. There's a lot of characters.
I think that's
Did
the way that Nolan kind of plays around with his films in terms of timelines as well, and like giving you certain pieces of information at the beginning that would normally come towards the end of a narrative, and then you kind of it's that jigsaw element that he brings to his films a lot.
Yes, which in a way I've always found that Nolan does like to overcomplicate things a little bit too much sometimes. I found this quite irritating in Dunkirk. I thought it was a amazing looking film, a visceral and audio kind of experience. Same way with this one, but I just felt like you are overcomplicating it with the timelines. And I know he loves to play with time, and it felt and I didn't hit upon it as much of like, oh, this is really annoying this time, but it was like, dude, you don't have to bring yourself to every film. And maybe this is another
Yeah.
comparison as we see the start of Greta Gerwig, who many would potentially consider an auteur as well, in the same way that many would consider Nolan an auteur. I feel like Greta Gerwig, like you said, the thread between the films so far seems to be mother daughter relationships. But in terms of like anything visual or anything like that, she almost like she is almost just so happy for the film to be exactly what the film needs to
Hmm.
be.
Yeah, there's
And she
no
doesn't bring
commonality
any kind
visually
of
between the three. Yeah.
pretentiousness. She doesn't bring like, oh, I have to do it this way because this is my style. Whereas I feel like Nolan can't let a film not feel like a Christopher Nolan film. He has to bring something of himself to it. And some people might love that, but I do think sometimes just like, dude, you are overcomplicating things. This is a very complicated film to begin with. I did appreciate when they would mention somebody and then they'd flash back to them, and I'd be like, aha, yeah, thank you. I did need that visual reference of who that person was. But yeah, I
There
just
are a
think
lot of
like,
names to keep up with here if you're not like
yeah.
historically, in the know-how or in the loop.
Thankfully, they're mostly people you recognize, and I think that was part of the casting process. Was like the more famous people you have,
Yes,
like
yeah.
the more you might remember who they were.
There's a lot of like a little not cameos, but like a lot of his supporting Trinity team are like a lot of actors we haven't like seen for a while. We got like Josh from Drake and Josh is even
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Dane DeHaan, haven't seen him in a while.
Dean DeHaan, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And Casey Affleck's a small role in this too and everything.
yeah,
And
yeah. I
yeah,
thought he was cancelled, but yeah, that's cool. He was very
I,
good in
I
this.
I thought so too, but he was doing the Casey Affleck thing very very well.
He was very good. He was very good, and yeah, yeah, and obviously Josh Hartnett, who I
Yeah,
thought was brilliant in this as well. But obviously, I think out
Benny
of
Safdie, yeah.
Benny Safdie, yeah, yeah, obviously out of everybody, like Killian Murphy was MVP. I thought his performance was incredible, and I know it's really stupid to talk about awards and stuff like that, but like it is his Oscar to lose at this point. Like
At
it
this
was an
point, yeah.
insane
I,
performance.
Talking about great performances, Oscar worthy. I think Downey Jr. is worth putting in that category too.
Yep,
Seeing him in a completely different gear here, where it's Downey Jr. as you see him normally, but he transforms into the character, like into the figure of Strauss. I mean, he is just completely kind of snide and quite villainous here. I mean, he
yeah,
is very
and it
very
is still like we have seen Rob Downey Jr. turn it up to 10 for the last 10 years. Like he plays that role, and it was interesting to see him tone it down. Still
yeah.
felt a little Downey Jr. like the kind of Iron Man days, but like there was like some nuance to it, and I
There was
really did
nuance, yeah.
I did really appreciate that. Yeah, no, he plays a very good part, and obviously is it's difficult because he's not a main character, but because the film very much focuses on this is from Oppenheimer's point of view, and this is from Strauss's point of view. Like you get, he is that main antagonist potentially.
So that brings me on to discussing the differences in kind of shooting some of this in color and shooting some of this in black and white and the intent behind that. I had heard before going into this film that there was an intent to kind of show everything that's sort of factual and documented is in black
Yes.
and white, and everything that's in color is sort of from Oppenheimer's experience or point of view or an internal character thing. but I didn't see that like going to. It got more complicated as the movie went on because moments where I felt that this was a documented part of history were still in color, and especially moments of the hearing. And I thought the whole hearings. I don't know if that's a non-documented thing or if that is a subjective event, but I kind of got a little bit confused about the intent of that halfway through the film.
I heard the same thing, and then obviously I drew my own conclusions throughout the film. I was like, okay, with this is POVs more than anything, and anything in color is very much Oppenheimer's POV. It does get muddled in some scenes, I think. I don't think there's always a clear line of like. I think the intent was POV, and I think sometimes there's the odd scene where you're like, whichever it looks best.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think 90 to 95% of this film is the clear stylistic element is Oppenheimer's POV, Strauss's POV. But again, it's one of those things of like Nolan won't hold your hand. He just kind of drops you in this. He's not giving you any kind of
Hmm.
if you had all the knowledge of that historical period and maybe had read Oppenheimer's book or read books about Los Alamos and stuff like that, you would probably be like, yeah, I understand everything that's going on. But if you don't, then it is very much a case of like, I'm constantly catching up to like, okay, I'm getting it. And the film obviously lends itself to being like the vibe of what's happening is
Yeah, no, it's
understandable.
it's an
But
overwhelming
the
flood of
little
feeling that comes over
details,
you.
you're
Yeah.
like, I'm not getting every detail, but I'm getting there.
and I
But
and I
it
I appreciate that in Nolan that
oh
he
yeah.
doesn't want to, he likes to intellectualize his work, and and not at the expense of will audiences go to see this thing. He'll make the movie that he wants to make, and it's very interesting sitting in a full sort of auditorium of people and kind of just I'm keeping along with the thing, but I'm wondering what the other reactions in the cinema are too, and it's quite interesting. I think I don't know. Do you think like a lot of people will? There's a lot of loyalty to Nolan that a lot of filmmakers don't get in terms that they will give him a 10 before they'll even see it. And I
Mm,
do think that that is a problem with his fan base, which is monumental in a way. And
mhm.
I do feel like it is here too. We saw a lot of memes with people like watching Barbie on their phones whilst watching Oppenheimer, saying that they're completely lost and that it's a snooze fest. I did not get that throughout this experience. I thought it was a very overwhelming experience. And you're right, there are
Yeah.
moments where you're like, okay, straining to kind of keep a sort of tag on where we are, but you kind of you
Yeah.
get there eventually.
Loses steam a little bit in that final act. I know a lot of people have commented that they really didn't like the final hour of the film or the everything post the test sequence. I don't get that fully, but I do definitely think it is one of the weaker elements of the film because
I
you
would,
have to you are so wrapped up in the creation of the nuclear bomb that like everything after that you almost have to get on board with it. Um,
well, then that's probably it's either a problem with the film or it's a problem with yourself because are you there to see a film? No, but I'm serious. Are you there?
I just like the way you
No,
phrase it.
yeah, well, I mean, is it? Are you there to see a film about a bomb? Are you there to see a movie about a person? And
Yeah,
if you check out in the last hour, then you're probably there to see a movie about a bomb.
yeah, true, true. I still very much like the final hour, even though I do think it did lose steam a little bit, and the length starts to. You're like, okay, I'm feeling the 3 hours now.
Oh
I'm
right,
feeling it.
okay.
I'm still invested, but I am starting to feel that 3 hours. But no, I did very much like it. But yeah, no, I think I think this is a return to form for Nolan. He doesn't really stray too far away from making excellent films. Just think Tenet was maybe a little bit of a miss for me.
Hmm.
But yeah, this feels like a really interesting kind of historical film, and it feels like very heavily and well researched, and then incredibly cast, and still suffers from some of the Nolan pretentiousness that happens
Hmm.
occasionally with his playing with time. And I kind of did roll my eyes at the uh, Killian Murphy uh, Florence Pugh sex scene where he reads, I am, I have become death, destroyer of worlds. I was like, oh, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at that, but yeah, no, it was very good. What did you think of, it is a very male dominated film. What did you think of like Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh in this?
Yeah, I think that there is an interest in the rules that women play within, but again, it's
In
subject
Nolan films or in this film?
in Nolan films in general.
Yeah, he
I,
does love. He does love to. We were talking about it in the last episode. Like fridging is definitely a thing in Nolan films.
Yeah. Well, although I give like Anne Hathaway like a lot of credit in, although I wasn't a big fan of the movie, The Dark Knight Rises, I think she's got like a lot of, she does. I think that's probably part of Anne Hathaway and what she brings to that role. She's really, really good as
Mhm.
Catwoman. But yeah, there is. I think that's sort of like a product of the story that we're telling initially too. I mean, it's hard to make this sort of a female centric film because this, unfortunately, this whole project and is sort of a man's world. But I think there are some interesting questions about the rules that women play within it. I think that he gives Emily Blunt a lot of good scope to show sort of the strength
She
of
gets
what
her
it's like to
scene as
deal.
well.
Yeah, what it's like to deal with a person like that.
Yeah.
She's not this sort of like saintly um, person that come home to, like, she has her problems as well.
Hmm.
Florence Pugh's character also the same, quite troubled, but very different ends of the scale, and but they are women that like bring different things to Oppenheimer as a character, and satisfy certain needs
Mm.
in different ways. One being support and one being like intellectual and sexual. So it's interesting to look at it that way, but I don't think it's at the forefront of the film's mind at all.
No, fair enough. Fair
What,
enough.
what about you?
Yeah, I thought they're both great.
But
I
yeah,
think
they're both fantastic in this. Yeah,
yeah, like they get their roles. You're right. Emily Blunt is very much the carer, but also like that very kind of similar scientific mind to things.
yeah,
Whereas Florence
untapped
Pugh,
potential. Yeah,
yeah, whereas Florence Pugh is like you said, it's the sexual desire, but also that kind of political. He can have the political conversations
she's
with
on his
her.
level. Yeah,
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 yeah. There's, it's that divide of like, what are my politics? But what do I want to achieve with science? It's like the two sides of the coin of Oppenheimer, essentially.
yeah. And she
Um,
represents a part of him that like he really struggles. Like he's so in control of his craft and his sort of scientific engineering that he can't do something as simple as like understand a woman really,
yeah,
and the needs and desires and how you can marry that with his work life. I think it's quite at odds. You're seeing somebody who is completely ahead of their game in the world, as opposed, and he can't do something that kind of comes as a basic function to a lot of people, and that's kind of the problematic nature of the character. It's that sort of um, all that greatness comes at a real expense.
would you recommend Oppenheimer?
Of course, I would. I think it's a great film.
Yeah,
I'm with you too. I think it's a return to form for Nolan. I think it's an experience. Definitely go see it in the cinema. Even though
yeah,
that it is like you said, there a lot of it is a very talky movie. It's very politically minded, but I think because of how zoomed in you are to the experience and what the experience demands of you, I think that it would not benefit as much from a home viewing.
yeah.
I
And
said
it
to
is.
anybody, watch something, watch everything, and if you want to, go see it in the cinema. Anyway.
Yeah, I was happy enough to get reclining seats, which made the three
Oh,
hours a little easier. Very
oh,
nice.
lovely.
But it does help that it is gorgeously shot. It has a brilliant soundtrack. This time, not by Hans Zimmer. It's Ludwig. I
Mhm.
don't know how you pronounce his second name. Gohansson.
He did like the Mandalorian score and everything, didn't
Yeah, I he's probably one of my kind of like favorite composers working currently.
he?
I think he's bringing some really interesting stuff into the film world, and it pairs very nicely with Oppenheimer here. And it is because the music is almost it's very subtle, but it's always there. There's always music there, but it's not as showy, I would say. But I don't know if you found this at the start, but I found the film because it cuts away quite quickly, and but there's always like this musical motif underneath it. It's a very interesting. You really have to settle into the flow of the film. At times, it feels like you're watching a trailer. I don't know if you got that at all, but I felt like I really had to settle into it at the start.
Yeah, at the start it really kicks off, and it's like you're already starting into the flow of like halfway through a movie. Like I could see somebody coming into the first scene, having like missed the trailers and like going, "Oh shit, we've missed half the movie." So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it definitely does have that part of it. You hit the ground running, but again, that's Nolan films in general. Yeah, I think about The Dark Knight and I think about Interstellar, and the music's already in gear. We're already into the story. We're already moving towards something.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of time. He establishes the characters through their actions, I suppose, and doesn't
Yeah,
do a lot of setup, but he does.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think in terms of the two films we reviewed this week, and in terms of the whole Barbenheimer weekend, I think Oppenheimer is the more interesting cinematic film, and I think Barbie is the more interesting kind of message film. Does that make sense? Like they both do really interesting things with
Yeah,
with their kind of stories that they're trying to tell, and they kind of elevate it in different ways.
yeah, 100%. I mean, they are both thought provoking in their own way. One, they're challenging in their own way, but obviously, Barbie, the former, is a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah,
you're gonna come out with a bit of a stretched grin on your face, and you're gonna be laughing along the whole way. And Oppenheimer is definitely, as you expect.
yeah,
We're not saying anything new here. Oppenheimer is exactly, they're both what you're going to expect them to be, and they're
yeah.
both really really good at doing that, and they're going to hit the beats that you expect them to. Just go out and join the crowds and go see them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just to close out the episode. Favorite Greta Gerwig film. Favorite Nolan film.
Right, so I actually ranked, I'm going to rank the three Greta Gerwig ones because there's only three. So I would say my favorite is still Little Women,
Yeah.
then Lady Bird, then Barbie. But that's like, it's hard because all three of those movies are great to me. I just think that the Women and Lady Bird are just exceptional films.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I guess maybe it's recency bias, but I'd maybe go Little Women, then Barbie, then Ladybird, maybe.
okay,
Um, maybe. Man, I really don't want to see her do Netflix Narnia films. Those are the next ones she signed on to.
yeah, I've so have
I don't
heard,
want to. I
yeah,
don't want to see it. But at the same time, I do admire the fact that she's very much like I want to be a. She's not going into this going, oh, one for me, one for them, one for me, one for them. She's like, I want to be a studio filmmaker. So like, fair play. Like she could be,
yeah.
as big as Spielberg, and
But then she
I'd
might
be
get into
happy with
this
that.
sort of like rhythm of doing movies that are like targeted to a sort of maybe a preteen sort of age group.
Yeah,
You
we'll
know, I,
see. I just don't. Yeah, would like to see more interesting big films than a Narnia adaptation slash remake for Netflix. Just not what I'm feeling from Greta Gerwig next, and we'll see how that goes.
hmm. And
What about Nolan then?
favorite Nolan film, I would still pit it between Memento and Interstellar for me.
Oh, interesting. Interstellar's definitely. So I would go Interstellar or The Dark Knight, just because like
The Dark Knight is so
I
good. I know
cannot
it's
get
hard.
away from the way I felt watching The Dark Knight for the first time,
I
and
know.
just I literally I missed it in the cinema, just
Oh,
because
I
these
saw it in the cinema in
these
2008.
were the
Yeah.
days where I was like not as like I was a comic book fan, but I was very much a Spider-Man fan more than anything else. I didn't really venture much out of my comfort
Didn't
zone
want to
there,
cheat on
so
him.
I knew I liked Batman, but I wasn't actively going to the cinema to watch Batman. So I got it on DVD for Christmas, and I remember finishing the film and then just hitting restart on the film because I was just like, "What did I just watch? That was incredible!" And I literally watched it straight away again, and I haven't done that in a film since. I don't think.
It is still like, apart from Spider-Man 2, it's the other benchmark for that type of film. It really, really
Yeah,
is. It's hard. I mean, you're convincing me now. I mean, I think on a different day, I know you didn't really like Dunkirk as much, but I remember being absolutely floored by Dunkirk when it came out. I need to revisit it again, but I liked how it played with time and
yeah,
everything. I think again, it's a common thread, but Interstellar really, I think, is when Nolan really hit that emotional beat and really
yeah.
married his scientific mind with the emotions of the characters. And I think that's a lot to do with McConaughey as a performer in this movie too.
Mhm.
But yeah, that kind of was just a like an existential, ethereal experience when I
Yeah,
saw
and
that
it
for the
helps
first
with
time.
big sci-fi fans as well. Like
Yeah,
seeing sci-fi
yeah,
treated in that way was also in a very lofty way was
yeah. I like
memorable.
space. I like the
Yeah,
expanse,
and
and
probably the only like Nolan film I've cried at, I think. And yeah, I think I cried quite a lot at Interstellar. Yeah, it's quite beautiful in places, I think.
yeah, it is, especially when it gets like it drops the science and gets a little bit more like dreamy and
emotional.
a little bit, yeah.
And I know it's a meme now, but that scene where
Where he's crying at
McConaughey
the
is
screen.
watching those videos of his children growing up because he spent 5 minutes on a planet, which transferred to a ridiculous amount of years, and you're just like, yeah, I was a mess during that. I was an absolute mess.
Oh man, but
Um,
yeah, I just associate that with the meme now. Like, I remember when the Force Awakens Star Wars trailer came out, and it was
yeah,
like it was Matthew McConaughey just watching that trailer, and it was
so
so good.
good. So good. I would be very up for doing like a kind of rewatching all of the Nolan films for the podcast in the future when we have less
Homework,
series of
yeah,
films to watch. I'd happily do like a Nolan retrospective with you.
yeah. I haven't seen
Um,
his first film as well, so yeah,
yeah, I'd be up for that.
yeah, any day. Right, I think I've had enough of Barbenheimer now. I had to
And
like
I've had
reserve.
enough of you.
I've had enough of you too. I had to like, although it's been so great, the last week is all I've been. Every time you're on your phone, anytime you're just hearing about Barbie and Oppenheimer. So I'm glad we got out of the way. They're both great movies. I'm glad to focus on some more stuff next week now. Don't
Yeah,
know about you.
everything's being pushed back for the rest of the year, so it
I
looks like we're
know,
going to
I
have a
know.
pretty clear space to just get through our sight and sound uh, blind spots. So yeah.
We got a really big one to talk about next week, which
Ooh,
and
yes.
yeah, we won't spoil it so far, but we've already seen. So yeah, and that's the Red Shoes. So we're really, really excited to talk about that. And Le Jeté is the other film too, right?
Yep, yep. And then I don't know if you're going to get to it, but the big 3 hour Tarkovsky Russian film,
I won't be making it for next week,
Andrei
but next
Rublev.
week definitely. The week after
Yeah, okay,
definitely.
cool. Yeah, I think I was thinking the same. It's going to be busy the next few weeks. I'm
Yeah.
going to try and get to it at some point.
And what about new releases too? I mean, have you been watching anything else recently too? I mean, we caught up with They Clone Tyrone. I know you watched that
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
That was a pretty impressive movie
yeah.
too, and I
I
hope
did
I got,
enjoy that.
yeah. And we big fans of John Boyega, and yeah, if anybody sci-fi fans who really like that sort of Groundhog Day, where sort of sci-fi meets Edgar Wright. There's a lot of influences in there too. I think you'll have a lot of good stuff to say about this movie too. And if nothing else, watch it for Jamie Foxx because that is a performance I was not expecting this year.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah, but apart from that, I mean, yeah, we're really succumbing to the pressures of this ongoing strike at the minute, and really just kind of obviously supporting all the actors and writers. Um,
yep.
but
Screw the studios, man.
of
Screw Warner
course,
Brothers. As much as we enjoyed Barbie, screw them.
screw him, but thank you.
Pay your writers.
Make sure Dune comes out on November 3rd, or I'll be really mad.
Pay your writers. Pay your actors. You idiots. It's not hard.
I know. Oh well, that does it for us today, Alex. Really nice catching up with you again. Discuss
Nice
more
one.
movies again next week. As always, you can follow us on our handle at the Film Angle on Instagram, on Threads now, Alex. I actually, you know what?
Yeah,
You've set up this Threads account. I haven't even really been on it yet.
I've
Is it?
posted some things. So yeah. We're
Yeah.
on Threads. We're on Threads.
And obviously, as always, listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, anywhere you guys get your podcasts from. But for now, this has been Barbenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Chris.
I'm Alex.
See you later. Bye.
Goodbye.